Hi everybody, welcome or welcome back. It's September now, in fact almost October, and you know what that means? It's time for an August wrap up. I apologize in advance. I'm a little all over the place. I am very tired, and before I get into the wrap up, I would very briefly like to explain why that is. I am in the middle of moving from my apartment to a house uptown, and that is why I have my current background. I didn't have anything else in here really at all, so this is what you get. I'm dividing my time in between the two places. I am cleaning and packing here, and I am like cleaning and preparing the house, which is pretty old and very gross currently, over there, painting walls and whatnot. And so with everything, I have been overwhelmed and overstimulated both. I have, however, been reading, though not as much as I would like, but still, considering everything that is going on, a pretty impressive amount, I would like to say. So there it is. There will be more about the move forthcoming, I suppose. I don't know exactly to what degree I would like to include moving as, you know, hashtag content, but I would like to show you around, maybe do like a tour, show you how I'm settling in, that kind of thing. If that is something that you are interested in, please let me know in the comments. So that's it. On we go. I would like to start first with the books that I DNF'd in the month of August. First, The Cat in the City by Nick Bradley. This was a book that I read with my book club, which, if you don't already know, there's no reason why you shouldn't. We picked a theme this year for the first time, and that theme is cats. So we read books that feature a cat either in the plot or just anywhere in the story for any amount of time. And this book is, I don't want to call it a story collection. It's more of a series of related vignettes. So in the beginning, in the preface sort of part of the book, there's a young woman who wants to get a tattoo on her back of the city of Tokyo. Nothing but the buildings and the streets, no people, just the city. And her tattoo artist, who is creepy and gross, thinks he's getting away with something by tattooing a little tiny cat on the map somewhere in Tokyo. And in subsequent sessions, she comes back and the tattoo artist swears that the cat was at a different part of the map the last time she was there. As you go on, there are different bits of short fiction that involve different people, different residents of the city of Tokyo, and at some point, this cat that looks like the cat the tattoo artist put on this young woman shows up. And Nick Bradley, I learned, is I don't remember where, but he is a professor of like Japanese literature or something. In this book, I think either was or was begun by his like doctoral project. He is a white American who is an expert on Japanese literature. And I'm sure that this book is an homage, but it's really just kind of cringy, and I could not make it past 30%. I think that's even being generous. I think I made it to like 24, 25% and gave up. Something about it seemed very off. The Devil in Silver by Victor Laval. This was supposed to be, I'm sure it is, but I didn't read it to find out. It was supposed to be a supernatural horror / thriller that takes place in a psychiatric hospital. And I mean, it started off fine, I guess. There's just like a big dude named Pepper who is involuntarily hospitalized as a result of a violent altercation that he has. And so the part to which I made it was a 13-hour audiobook, and I made it about 2.5 hours in. And at that point, He had literally he had just finished being like booked in, spent his first night, and was being introduced gradually to like the other people who I guess would just be the core company of the story. And it was kind of dragging, nothing was really happening, and then there was repeated use of the R word, and I'm just like, no, I don't have to, I'm gonna not. And so I just gave up on it. So I don't have anything to report other than it's probably longer than it needs to be, and this book was published in like 2012, so literally no reason for slurs. I didn't care for that. Moving on to the books that I actually finished. I wanted to, just for the record, I guess, state that my plan this month, because I guess I was in the spirit of getting rid of things and cleaning stuff up, I was going through mostly my ebook collections. So on Scribd and on Kindle, and just kind of like going through titles that I'd had for a while to kind of A, get it out of the way, and B, I didn't want them to get lost, because you know how as you add titles, depending on how you sort them, titles that you've had longer just kind of like go lower and lower in your library, and I didn't want anything to get lost. First on this list is Her Final Words by Hilary Davidson. Mystery thriller, has 2 points of view. First is Deirdre. Deirdre's sister, Caroline, very suddenly dies. And the day after her funeral, Deirdre receives an email with a link, with an encrypted link to information that suggests that her late sister's husband might have something to do with her death. And then it's a mystery. The second point of view is, I forget his name, but Caroline's husband, ? The thing I think that disappointed me most about this book was that the voices of each respective point of view were identical. If you were to remove the names at the top of each chapter, the only way to know who was whom would be entirely based on context. Like, there was no way to know how the characters were actually different, which was disappointing. I mean, not only on a basic level, but because the characters themselves were so different. I actually thought that this was a debut novel, and I looked it up, and the author actually has written many books. Books which I think it goes without saying I will probably not be reading. Okay, next, Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This book was so good. Okay, so the book begins with a white middle-class nuclear family who has rented a large, nice house for their vacation. And I believe on the night they arrive, or the second night that they're there, late at night, they hear a knock on the door. And there's an older couple who claim that the house is theirs, and they are worried because they're hearing noises in the distance, and they've lost all of their cell signal, and they can't get a television signal anywhere, and the house is theirs. Can they please stay there? There's an ADU, like a separate like apartment level in the basement. They're like, there's a separate section of the house. We'll just go in there. We won't even bother you. If you want a refund, we can give it to you, but otherwise, ignore us completely. We're just gonna hang out down there. And the conflict is initiated because this older couple is Black and the renters are white. I kind of wish that the racism was more subtext than text, but honestly, I get why it had to be done that way. In any case, the parents of this family then confirm, like, they can't get their cell phones to work either, and they can't get the television to work, and everybody's very anxious and kind of scared. And without spoilers, I will say they're probably right to be a little bit anxious. And that's all I'll say. It's very, very good. The pace is a little slow, and a lot of it is ambiguous, I guess, where you're not entirely clear a lot of the time what is going on. But trust me, you don't mind by the end. It is definitely worth it. Also, I learned that I generally do not like stories told in the third person omniscient, but in this specific case, it was absolutely necessary. Choose Me by Tess Gerritsen and Gary Braver. I didn't hate this book, but it's a crime thriller. A detective is called to the scene after a young college-age woman has apparently jumped off of her third floor balcony, has died. And something or a couple of things don't seem right to the detective, so was it really a suicide? Let's find out. And I don't know how much I want to give you, because some of the information is vital to the plot. So I'm gonna leave that there. It wasn't bad. I think my main criticisms of this were not necessarily plot-based. Although I have to wonder, the Gary Braver is a pseudonym of some guy, I don't remember his name, but he is a professor, he's a college professor, Northwestern University, I wanna say. And the back cover copy says something about hashtag Me Too movement and how it was inspired by that. And honestly, with the amount of low-key misogyny in this book, I wonder how much Tess Gerritsen actually contributes to the book, or if it was just kind of like a lady author stamp on the work, because you have to wonder. Okay, so this detective is a lady detective, but she spends a lot of her internal monologue being incredibly critical about the way she looks, specifically her weight and how much weight she's put on since she's had kids. And at one point in the book, she actually reveals, or it comes out on the page, that she's a size 14. A size 14, and she's constantly talking about how fat she is. Also, she has twin daughters. She's a single mom, and she has twin daughters, and she explains in the book that it's because she's a detective and she sees what happens to young girls when they go out at night and, you know, they are alone and they go down the wrong street or whatever. But she is overly critical of her young-ish, I think they're 18, her 18-year-old twin daughters and what they're wearing all the time. And so what she says internally is misogynistic and fat-phobic, and what she says externally is victim blamey. So it's on page she's not a bad person, but it is very clear that these are biases of the author or authors, which is why I say I'm not 100% sure who did it. And I've never read anything from either of these authors before. I may do, to see how much effort do I want to put into that, though. Just be warned that parts of it are, but for the most part, it's not bad for a crime thriller. Next, The Lost Daughter Collective by Lindsay Drager. After I read The Archive of Alternate Endings, I immediately went to see if I could find other books by the author, and I found two, of which this is one, and I think I'm gonna have just about as much trouble trying to explain this one as I did with The Archive of Alternate Endings, so please bear with me and don't judge the book based on my ability to describe it. So Drager really loves to use a foundation of fairy and folk tales in her novels, and this one is told primarily both in the style of and kind of as a bedtime story. The main character at the beginning of the story is a young girl who I think is turning 5, who is turning 6, and a lot of the background is told by her father. They live in the institute at which he works as a scholar, attempting to prove that he works at a place called the Institute of the Wrist, which is an academic entity whose primary function is to prove the non-existence of the wrist. So the hand is real and the human arm is real, but the wrist, fake news, does not exist. So he is a scholar and is actually referred to in the book as a scholar or the scholar. He doesn't have a name. But he tells these stories to his daughter in a very kind of clinical, almost detached way, which might very well be a function of Draeger's narration. Like her voice is kind of detached, which is great because seemingly counterproductively, it kind of gives the reader, in my opinion, like a greater sense of immersion. I digress. Anyway, the stories that he tells his daughter are intercut with another kind of storyline in which there's a support group of fathers who have lost their young daughters, is worth mentioning. This is where it gets difficult to explain. This support group meets every month, and because it's the same group of men, they tend to tell the same stories of their daughters over and over again. So with the through line of this support group and the bedtime stories of the scholar and his young daughter, so between those two main through lines, you have actual fairy tales, but they're fairy tale-ized versions of the father's stories of their lost daughters. Again, I know it sounds just bananas, but it works. Also, Draeger likes to, as you can kind of tell by the nature of these like disparate stories that kind of come together, she also likes to jump back and forth in time a lot, which is definitely something that she did in Archive of Alternate Endings. So if you like that, if you like time jumps, if you like fairy tales or folk tales, again, you have my deepest apologies for just making an entire mess out of this plot, but if you have even the slightest interest, please read it. You will not regret it. The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Award. This was an e-arc that I got on NetGalley. It came out in August. I want to say mid-August. And, hang on. I think there's a wasp inside my home. I hate wasps so bad. Ugh! Hang on. Okay. It turns out he wasn't in my apartment. He had gotten into the screen, the window screen, and so he was trapped in between the screen and the actual window. So I saw him crawling on the window, and I thought he was inside, but he's still outside. So what I did is I stuffed some tissue in the borders of the frame, the window frame, to make sure that he couldn't crawl inside, because they've done it before. Because here's the thing, I hate wasps with a burning passion, but I won't kill one. I mean, I have, but I won't kill one if I can avoid it, because did you know, Wasp Information Minute with Andrea, did you know that when a wasp dies, like when a wasp is killed, it releases a pheromone that attracts other wasps? And this is a defense mechanism so that other wasps can kind of like come to its defense. So the last thing I want is more wasps. So I try to just kind of like either usher them if I can, or literally hide, because I'm not trying to die. So where was I? Right. The Last House on Needless Street. I would call it a psychological thriller. I think that would be fair to say. It has 4 main points of view. one. The first is Ted, who is a man who I believe is in his mid to late 30s. He was about 12 years prior accused of being a murderer, and he was cleared, but he's had a rough go of it and is an alcoholic. It's relevant. Second is Dee. Dee is in her mid-20s and had her young sister abducted about a decade before, when her family had gone on a beach vacation, and she has made it her mission, essentially, to either find her sister or the person responsible for her abduction. The third is a teenager who is named Lauren, who lives in Ted's house with him. I'm gonna leave that there. And then the fourth is a cat that lives in Ted's house. I thought that this was really well done. It's a bit long and the pace is very slow. What really made this book was how you think you know what's going on. And then there's the plot twist, and then it twists again. So really what made this book was probably the last 20% of it. So yeah, very good. I gave it 4 stars, I think. And that was mostly because of the slower pace. I think that a little more might have been edited out, but again, it all worked together. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. Milkfed by Melissa Broder. I've actually seen a lot of reviews of this book and almost everybody loved it, and I get it. I definitely see it. It is funny and a little bit sexy and very weird, and those are some of my favorite things. Content warning for eating disorders and general orthorexic behavior. Rachel, main character, is a 20-something young woman, office worker who spends basically all of her time, all of her like mental real estate, counting her calories and limiting her calories, and seeking validation from mostly people in like a supervisory or parental or particularly a mother role. She has a very complicated relationship with her mother. She is obsessed with being thin and staying thin, and then she meets Miriam, who works at her favorite frozen yogurt shop. Miriam is a fat woman. She comes from a loving and supportive Jewish Orthodox family, and there's a lot about Miriam and her life that Rachel covets, though she may not necessarily know that consciously. So in trying to process her feelings for Miriam, she discovers that she is attracted to Miriam. And so they have this extended flirtation, and Rachel becomes fixated essentially on Miriam and being with Miriam and loving Miriam instead of what she is eating and counting her calories. In so doing, she actually puts on a significant amount of weight, and that actually kind of changes her life perspective in a way. It was a very simple, a straightforward book, a straightforward plot, but full, complex. I had a really good time, and I don't know if you being the reader, are supposed to relate to Rachel, but I did in a lot of ways. And I don't know what that says about me and whether or not I need to kind of like reevaluate my life and many of my choices. Gilded Needles by Michael McDowell. Historical fiction, takes place in the late 1880s in New York, in very like wealthy parts of New York City, like from 5th Street to 25th, and also the Black Triangle, which was an actual New York neighborhood, much like the Five Points, which was very crowded, full predominantly of immigrants, also kind of overrun with like poverty and crime. This book is categorized on Scribd as horror, psychological thriller, and revenge tale. One of those is correct. Horror? No. It could be argued that it is a psychological thriller, possibly, but definitely a revenge story. Living in the Black Triangle, Lena Shanks, Black Lena. Her family is broken up and members of her family have been harmed, and she has decided that she is going to have her revenge on the wealthy judge who started the whole thing, and basically as much of his family as she can get. I actually had a very good time. This is not surprising because, you know, I love historical fiction, and most historical fiction that takes place in the 1800s is usually going to be a solid choice for me. My biggest gripe, and I still get mad when I think about it. Okay, there are, in this book, a pair of silent women assassins who use golden claws as weapons. And the cover implies, I'll show that one more time, that cover suggests that they feature prominently in this book. 2 scenes. They are in 2 scenes, and not even like in action. Admittedly, the most terrifying part of this book, and there's like 3 pages between them, I feel robbed. It was fine. 3 stars. And finally, the last book I managed to read this month, Divergent Mind, Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You by Janara Narenberg. This is not a memoir, but the author's autism spectrum disorder and sensory processing disorder diagnoses prompted this study of neurodivergence in women and how their environments can accommodate and more often agitate their perceptions and engagement in said environments. Mostly what this book offers is a series of solutions, changes in a range of things from diagnostics to interior design to workplace accommodations that are structured in a way that acknowledges the diverse nature of brain function and development, as opposed to a set of symptoms that are abhorrent or abnormal. Now, for me, the part that I think I related to most, other than just like in a general sense, in the sense that you know that you're not alone. In addition to that, I think I liked most the part about work and work accommodations, because that is, in my experience, what has impacted me most directly, and how easy it would be for a company to accommodate their employees by listening to them and believing them when they say things. But anyway, that is not a conversation we are going to have right now. Not only is this by far the best book by a neurodivergent author that I have read so far this year, it is the best book I think I read this month. So I feel like it was not completely all over the place, but like I didn't really have enough, like I had enough time to read the books, but I didn't have a lot of time to like process them, to like formulate my opinions on them in a cohesive kind of way. So there you go. I'm not entirely sure what everything going on is going to do to my output. Like, my plan was to get used to it, get a handle on it, and then increase the number of videos that I put out per week or per month, which is still ultimately going to happen. But I just think it is going to take longer than I originally expected. But again, you can only do what you can do, and I'm trying not to burn myself out. So there it is. And then, like I said, with the move, I do hope to integrate a little bit of the experience into my videos. Let me know again if that is a terrible idea or not. Also, please let me know about books. Tell me what you are reading, and tell me if you have a particular system for handling your TBR, or particularly how you deal with the books that you've had the longest. That is it, and I will see you, hopefully, sooner rather than later in my next video. Bye!